So here's the thing about galactic survey missions. They're supposed to be safe, routine, and utterly boring. You map some rocks, scan for minerals, maybe discover a new type of space moss, then head home for your paycheck. Nobody mentions the part where your alien crewmates abandon you on a frozen death ball and leave you to become an ice sculpture. My name is Marcus Reeves, and I used to be a mid-level engineer on the survey ship Prosperity's Edge. Notice I said used to be. That's because my former employers, a species of perpetually nervous rabbit-looking aliens, called the Velnari, decided that insurance premiums were more valuable than human life. Let me set the scene. We'd just dropped into orbit around Frost 9, which was exactly as appealing as it sounds. The planet was classified as a tomb world, meaning some ancient civilization had lived there, done some stuff, then died or left or possibly got bored to death because everything was frozen. Our job was simple. Land, scan some ruins, confirm there was nothing valuable, then move on to the next disappointing rock in space. Captain Quillen, my boss and the most anxiety-ridden creature I'd ever met, kept wringing his tiny paws together during the briefing. "Quicken, quick out," he squeaked. "Statistical models show a 0.03% chance of complications." Should have known right then that the universe was about to prove statistics wrong. The surface expedition went fine for about 20 minutes. I was scanning some ancient structures with two Velnari crew members, Pex and Tillin, when a freak ice storm rolled in. And I mean rolled in. 1 second we had visibility. The next second I couldn't see my own hands. The wind hit like a frozen freight train. "Back to the ship," someone yelled through the comm. I turned to follow the signal, but my scanner chose that exact moment to malfunction and lead me in completely the wrong direction. By the time I realized my mistake and found the landing site, I saw something that would be burned into my memory forever. The Prosperity's Edge, lifting off without me. I waved my arms like a maniac. I screamed into my comm unit, which was now producing nothing but static. I watched that ship, my ride home, my entire connection to civilized space, blast through the atmosphere and vanish into the black. They'd waited 12 minutes. I know because I checked my suit's timer later. 12 minutes before Captain Quillen decided that statistical survival probability protocols meant I was dead and they should save themselves. I stood there in the howling wind, alone on a frozen tomb world, staring at ancient alien ruins that looked about as welcoming as a cemetery in a blizzard. My survival pack contained an emergency tent, 2 weeks of rations, a basic toolkit, and a handbook on positive thinking. "Well," I said to absolutely nobody, "this is going on Space Advisor with a 1-star review." The ruins loomed behind me, dark and imposing. My suit's temperature gauge was dropping fast. I had 2 choices: stand around feeling sorry for myself and freeze to death, or get inside those structures and figure out how not to die. I chose option 2, mostly because spite is an excellent motivator. The entrance to the nearest ruin was partially buried in ice, but I managed to clear enough to squeeze through. Inside, it was somehow even colder, which I hadn't thought was possible. The walls were covered in strange geometric patterns that probably meant something important to whoever built this place. To me, they meant ancient and unhelpful. But here is the thing about being abandoned on a frozen planet with nothing but rage and engineering training. You start noticing details. Those patterns on the walls, they were conducting something faintly. Heat signatures, barely detectable but definitely there. This place wasn't completely dead. I set up my emergency tent in what looked like a main hall, fired up my portable heater, and got to work on the only thing I could do: survive long enough to make Captain Quillen regret every life decision that led to this moment. Turns out, when you're stuck on a frozen tomb world with nothing but time and anger, you become really good at exploring ancient ruins. Who knew? The first week was rough. I rationed my food, melted ice for water, and spent every waking hour mapping the structures. The ruins were extensive, way bigger than the initial survey suggested. Either the Velnari did the worst scan job in galactic history, or they just didn't care. Given my recent experience with their dedication to thoroughness, I was betting on option 2. The structures went deep underground, which made sense because surface real estate on this ice ball was worth exactly nothing. I found hulls, chambers, what looked like living quarters, and most importantly, I found technology. The civilization that built this place, whoever they were, had been seriously advanced. I'm talking power conduits built into the walls, crystalline data storage that still hummed with residual energy, and machinery that looked functional despite being covered in 10,000 years of dust. In the third week, I hit the jackpot. A central chamber with walls covered floor to ceiling in those geometric patterns, all converging on a massive cylindrical structure in the center. It took me 2 days of careful examination to realize what I was looking at. A reactor. A geothermal reactor tied directly into the planet's volcanic core. I actually laughed when I figured it out. Then I cried a little because I was losing my mind from isolation. Then I laughed again because this frozen tomb world had a functioning power source, and Captain Quillen had classified it as worthless. The next challenge was getting the thing to actually turn on. Ancient alien technology doesn't come with instruction manuals, and my engineering degree from Earth hadn't covered xenotech resurrection procedures. But here's what I learned about being desperate and alone. You try everything. I spent days studying the control interfaces, cross-referencing patterns, making educated guesses, and occasionally just pushing random symbols to see what happened. On day 23, something finally responded. The reactor hummed to life. With a sound like distant thunder, lights flickered on throughout the chamber, then the adjacent halls, then further into the complex. I watched in amazement as 10 millennia of darkness got pushed back by a civilization's final gift to whoever came after. Heat followed the lights. Actual, beautiful, life-saving heat. That's when I found the data archives. Crystalline storage units started projecting information in a visual format I could mostly understand. It took time to piece together the story, but eventually I got the gist. The civilization called themselves the PR. They'd been masters of geothermal engineering, living comfortably on this world despite its frozen surface by tapping into the volcanic activity below. Their cities were underground marvels, powered by the planet's own heat, but their sun had started cooling prematurely, some stellar anomaly that even their advanced science couldn't fix. So they'd packed up and left, sealing their cities in hibernation mode rather than destroying them. The Pyrethy had hoped to return someday, or maybe leave their legacy for someone else to find. Well, congratulations, ancient aliens. A very angry human found your stuff, and I'm about to put it to good use. The archives showed me where other city sections were located, how the power grid worked, and most exciting of all, where they kept their fabrication facilities. The Pyrethy had left behind machines that could manufacture tools, components, and even automated worker units. It took another month, but I got the first fabricator online. Watching it produce a working drone from raw materials was the best moment of my life. And yes, I'm including my graduation, and that time I won a pie-eating contest. I named the first drone Jenkins, after my old supervisor who'd told me I'd never amount to anything. Felt appropriate. By month 3, I had a dozen drones operational, had restored heat and power to 3 city sections, and had started growing actual food in the Pyrethy hydroponic bays using preserved seed banks I'd discovered. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something, and every single day. I thought about Captain Quillen's face when he found out. Month 4 on Frost 9, or as I'd started calling it in my personal logs, the best, worst thing that ever happened to me. I had 37 drones now, each one named after someone who doubted or annoyed me throughout my life. Jenkins was still my favorite, but Peterson was a close second. He was particularly good at heavy lifting. The underground city was coming alive in sections. I'd mapped about 40% of it, which was impressive considering I was one human with limited time and an ever-growing to-do list. The Pyrethy had built for a population of thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Their architecture was functional but elegant, with those geometric patterns serving as both art and structural reinforcement. I'd established a main operations center in what used to be some kind of administrative hub, screens displaying data and Pyrethy symbols that I'd learned to read through trial, error, and one memorable afternoon when I accidentally activated a children's educational program. Thanks, ancient alien Sesame Street. The geothermal power was flowing to all major sections now. I had heat, light, clean water from melted ice, processed through Pyrethy filtration systems, and fresh vegetables growing in the hydroponic gardens. Actual tomatoes on a frozen tomb world. Take that, statistical survival probability. But I wasn't content with just surviving comfortably. See, something had shifted in my thinking around week 6. I'd stopped focusing on rescue and started focusing on success. Why wait for someone to save me when I could save myself? Why hope for extraction when I could build something that made extraction unnecessary? So I got ambitious. The PRT manufacturing complex was incredible once I fully understood it. Automated assembly lines that could produce everything from simple tools to complex machinery. All I needed was raw materials. Unfortunately, this planet had plenty of rock and ice to process. I set up mining operations using the drones. They worked tirelessly, never complained, and never abandoned anyone on frozen planets. Significant improvements over my previous coworkers. Beaumont 5 had 200 operational drones, a functioning city infrastructure spanning 8 major sections, and I'd even restored what appeared to be a spaceport hangar built into the side of a mountain. The hangar was empty. The Pyrathy had taken their ships, but the facility itself was sound. The landing pads, refueling systems, and maintenance bays all worked once I got power flowing to them. That's when I had my brilliant, petty, absolutely perfect idea. The Pyrathy long-range communications array was still intact, built into the highest peak of a mountain range about 50 kilometers from the main city. It took me 3 weeks to reach it with a team of drones, another 2 weeks to restore it. But when I finally got that thing powered up and transmitting, I nearly cried from joy. I could send messages to the galactic network. My first transmission was simple. Marcus Reeves, human engineer, checking in from Frost 9. Contrary to reports of my death, I'm doing fantastic. The tomb world is lovely this time of year. Amenities include geothermal heating, hydroponic gardens, and a stunning absence of co-workers who abandon you. 5 stars for the accommodations, 0 stars for the shuttle service. Updates to follow. I sent that message out on every commercial frequency I could access, and smiled for the first time in months. The galaxy was about to hear from the human they left behind, and I was going to make sure they never forgot it. My messages became something of a phenomenon, though I didn't know it at the time. I'd been sending regular updates for 2 months, treating them like vacation reviews crossed with engineering logs. Apparently, the concept of a human not just surviving but thriving on a certified tomb world was causing quite a stir across multiple star systems. I learned this when 3 ships appeared in orbit on month 8. I was in the middle of programming a new batch of drones when my restored sensor array started screaming alerts. My first thought was that Captain Quillen had developed a conscience, which would have been shocking. My second thought was more realistic. Someone wanted to see if my messages were legitimate or the ravings of a frozen madman. The lead ship transmitted a request to land, professional, polite, and probably armed to the teeth. I granted permission because, honestly, I was curious. Also, I'd activated the Pyrathy defense systems 2 weeks ago and was reasonably confident I could handle trouble if these visitors got problematic. The ships landed at my restored spaceport, which I have to say looked pretty impressive. Clean landing pads, functional navigation beacons, and atmospheric processors keeping the hangar area at comfortable temperatures. Not bad for a dead world. The delegation that emerged was led by a creature that looked like someone had crossed a lizard with a used car salesman. He wore what I assumed was expensive clothing and carried a datapad like it was a holy relic. Marcus Rabes, he called out in heavily accented but understandable galactic common. I am Vendiclix of the Mercantile Union. We've been following your transmissions with great interest. I leaned against a cargo lifter operated by Jenkins and crossed my arms. Welcome to Frost 9. Sorry about the cold outside, but as you can see, we've made some improvements. Clix's eyes went wide as he looked around the hangar. His entourage, a mix of different species, were equally stunned. I could practically see them calculating property values in their heads. This is remarkable, Clix said. Our surveys indicated this world was completely non-functional. The ruins were considered archaeological curiosities at best. Yeah, well, your surveys were garbage. No offense. Actually, full offense. You people classified this place as worthless, and I've spent 6 months proving otherwise. One of Clix's assistants, a floating jellyfish thing, drifted forward. How did you accomplish this? One human, alone, with minimal resources. Spite, mostly. Also, coffee substitutes made from local fungi, which taste horrible but keep you awake. And a burning desire to make everyone who rode off this planet look foolish. You'd be amazed what you can accomplish with the right motivation. I gave them a tour, because why not? I showed them the restored city sections, the geothermal power systems, the manufacturing facilities, the hydroponic gardens, everything. Their expressions shifted from skepticism to amazement to barely concealed greed. Klix was taking notes, constantly. The technology here, the Pyrothi systems, they're worth billions, possibly trillions, if fully operational. They are fully operational. I've been running them for months. Then we must discuss salvage rights immediately. The Mercantile Union can offer you transportation off this world and fair compensation for your discoveries. I stopped walking and turned to face him. Salvage rights. Vendor Klix, I didn't salvage anything. I restored a civilization. This isn't abandoned property. This is my home now. I've put in the work, claimed the territory, and I have the functioning infrastructure to back it up. The jellyfish assistant burbled something that the translator rendered as, but surely one human cannot claim an entire planetary facility. Watch me. Galactic maritime law, which applies to space exploration, states that abandoned property can be claimed through continuous occupation and improvement. I've been here 8 months, made massive improvements, and I'm not going anywhere. This is my planet now. Klix's smile became sharper. Maritime law also allows for contested claims, Mr. Reeves. The Mercantile Union has considerable resources to challenge your ownership. Before I could respond, Jenkins and about 50 other drones rolled into formation behind me. Then the room's defensive systems activated, not threateningly, just a gentle reminder that they existed. The Parathi had built excellent security protocols. You're welcome to try, I said pleasantly. But I should mention that I've restored the planetary defense grid, figured out most of the weapon systems, and I have an army of tireless workers who follow my commands without question. Also, I'm recording this conversation and broadcasting it on 17 different frequencies. The galaxy is watching. Klix's expression shifted from predatory to calculating. I see. Perhaps we can discuss a partnership instead. Now you're talking my language. Let's negotiate over some terrible mushroom coffee. The partnership discussions with vendor Klix were just getting interesting when my sensors picked up another ship entering orbit. Then another. Then 5 more. One of them was the Prosperity's Edge. Well, I said, setting down my mushroom coffee, this is about to get entertaining. Captain Quillen's voice crackled over the communication system, high-pitched and nervous as ever. I looked at Klix, who was trying very hard not to smile. Prior claim, I asked into the com. Captain, you abandoned me here. I believe your exact words were something about statistical survival protocols and insurance. Premiums. That was a regrettable miscommunication, Mr. Reeves. We attempted to return, but were delayed by administrative procedures. However, the Valneri Corporation maintains legal rights to all discoveries made by our survey teams, including technological findings on Frost 9. The sheer audacity made me laugh. Oh, this is too good. You left me to die, and now you want to claim my work as company property. 6 more ships dropped into orbit. News vessels, I realized. Their transponders identifying them as media outlets from various systems. My broadcasts had attracted attention, and someone had tipped off the press about the confrontation. Perfect. Tell you what, Captain. Come on down. Bring your lawyers. Let's have this conversation where everyone can see it. An hour later, my hangar was crowded with journalists, corporate representatives, and a very uncomfortable-looking Captain Quillen. Quillen, flanked by Valneri legal advisors, I'd made sure every camera had a perfect view of the restored facility, the operational drones, and most importantly, my smiling face. For those just tuning in, I said directly to the cameras, "My name is Marcus Reeves. 8 months ago, I was abandoned on this planet by the Valneri Exploration Corporation. After being employed as an engineer on their survey vessel, they left me here, alone, on a world they classified as worthless. I survived, discovered the Pyrethy civilization's dormant technology, and single-handedly restored this facility to working order. Now that the planet has proven valuable, my former employers want to claim everything I've built as their property." Captain Quillen stepped forward, wringing his paws. "The company's position is that Mr. Reeves was operating under our employment contract when he made these discoveries. Terefore. All findings belong to the corporation. I was operating under your employment until you left me behind to freeze to death. I'm pretty sure that violates several terms of the contract, specifically the ones about occupational safety and not abandoning employees. On hostile worlds," one of the Valneri lawyers spoke up, "the decision to evacuate was made following proper protocols, given the atmospheric conditions and Mr. Reeves' failure to return to the vessel. Within the designated time frame." The designated time frame was 12 minutes. 12. I've timed bathroom breaks longer than that. The journalists were eating this up, their recording devices capturing every word. I could see Quillen getting more nervous by the second. Clicks stepped forward, sensing an opportunity. "The Mercantile Union supports Mr. Reeves' claim to Frost 9 based on the principle of salvage and restoration rights. Furthermore, we re-prepared to offer trade agreements and resource partnerships on terms favorable to the Planet S. Legitimate owner." More voices joined in, a representative from a human diplomatic corps. Apparently summoned by the brewing controversy, an independent, legal expert on interstellar property law, even a few random aliens who'd been following my broadcasts and showed up to support the human who would unquit. The tide of public opinion was clear. News feeds were lighting up with commentary, most of it siding with me. Hashtags like Remember Frost 9 and 12 minutes were trending across multiple networks. Captain Quillen looked like he wanted to disappear into his fur. The Valneri lawyers huddled together, their confident posture crumbling as they realized they were losing the public relations battle catastrophically. Finally, a senior corporate representative stepped forward, a Valneri in expensive business attire who looked deeply unhappy. "The Valneri Exploration Corporation is prepared to reach a settlement. We will formally recognize Mr. Reeves' independent claim to the Frostine facility and retract our prior assertions, in exchange for the corporation facing no further legal action regarding the incident. And and a formal apology for the regrettable circumstances that led to your extended stay on the planet. Say it like you mean it." The representative's whiskers twitched. "We sincerely apologize for leaving you behind, Mr. Reeves. It was a failure of protocol and judgment. We're relieved you survived. I pretended to consider it. Apology accepted. The settlement is acceptable, but I want it in writing, with copies sent to every news outlet currently in orbit. And I want Captain Quillen's employment status reviewed because his decision-making is clearly compromised." Quillen squeaked in protest, but the corporate representative nodded grimly. Agreed. Clicks approached with a proper contract, this time offering partnership terms that actually respected my ownership. Other trade representatives followed, everyone wanting a piece of the restored Pyrethy technology and the increasingly famous story of Frost 9. By the end of the day, I had legal recognition of my claim, trade agreements with 4 different factions, and a request for an exclusive interview from the galaxy's most popular news program. Not bad for someone who was supposed to be dead. 1 year after being abandoned, I stood in my climate-controlled observation deck, watching ships come and go from what everyone was now calling Spite S Forge. The official designation was still Frost 9, and ID renamed it New Parathis, in honor of the civilization that made all this possible. But popular culture had its own ideas. I didn't mind. Dename. Fit. The planet had changed dramatically. The underground city now housed a permanent population of about 200 individuals from various species, all working under contracts I'd personally approved. Scientists studying PRT technology, trade representatives managing shipping operations, even a few tourists who paid ridiculous amounts to visit the place where the human who would unquit had built his civilization. I'd written a book, mostly out of spite and boredom during slow periods. Left Behind, a survivor's guide to petty revenge, became a bestseller in human space and sold decently across several other species markets. Apparently, the concept of turning abandonment into empire resonated with a lot of people. My favorite review came from a Velnary reader who derated it 1 star, with the comment offensive and exaggerated. I framed it and hung it in my office. Captain Quillen had indeed lost his position. Last I heard, he was working at a gift shop on Frontier Station 7, selling trinkets to tourists. I didn't wish him harm, but I also didn't feel particularly bad about it. Actions have consequences, and his consequence was retail. The Mercantile Union partnership had worked out well. Vendor cliques visited monthly to review operations and profit shares, and despite my initial suspicion, he'd proven to be a decent business partner. Turns out when you establish clear boundaries with aggressive negotiators, they respect you more. I'd started a foundation with some of the profits, dedicated to improving safety protocols for survey operations and supporting crews who'd been mistreated by corporate employers. It seemed like a good use of money I'd earned by refusing to die. The drones were up to 500 units now. Jenkins was still my favorite, though he'd needed a major overhaul after a mining incident. Peterson had taken over most of the heavy manufacturing operations and was doing excellent work. I'd even started dating someone, a human xenorchaeologist named Halira, who'd come to study the Pyrothi ruins and stayed because, in her words, anyone who builds a civilization out of anger and engineering is worth getting to know. We had our first date in the hydroponic gardens. Surrounded by tomatoes and terrible mushroom coffee, life was good. Strange, unexpected, and built on a foundation of spite, but good. My unit chimed. Incoming message from Earth's Colonial Administration. Probably another interview request or legal document to review. I'd become something of a celebrity in human space, the poster child for persistence and resourcefulness. They'd even started using Remember Spice Forge as a motivational slogan in engineering schools. I smiled and filed the message for later. Right now, I had a meeting with a team planning to restore another section of the city, then dinner with Tom. And after that, I wanted to check on the new power grid expansion. Through the observation deck windows, I could see the frozen surface of the planet, still hostile and deadly to anyone without proper equipment. But beneath that frozen shell was warmth, life, and a thriving community built from the ashes of an ancient civilization and one humaness' refusal to accept death. I raised my cup of terrible mushroom coffee in a silent toast to the Parathi wherever they'd gone. Thanks for leaving the lights on. Then I got back to work. Spite's Forge wasn't going to run itself, and I had a civilization to maintain. After all, the best revenge isn't just living well. It is building something so successful that everyone who doubted you has to live with the knowledge that they were wrong. And I was living very, very well.